All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to talk about that really chilling feeling. You know, the one when reality just feels a little off. And to get through this psychological maze, our guide is maybe a little unexpected. It's the ancient Greek god of thieves and messengers, Hermes. So let's just start with a question, because I think it gets right to the heart of this. Have you ever had that fleeting moment when, I don't know, your own thoughts, your house, even your reflection in the mirror suddenly seems unfamiliar? What is that feeling? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. First up, we're going to define that unsettling feeling. Psychologists have a great name for it, the uncanny. Then we'll look at the total opposite, this ideal of absolute self-control. And after that, we'll see what happens when that control just shatters, when all the stuff we push down comes roaring back. And to wrap it all up, we'll look at a really practical, everyday example. All right, so what is this strange feeling, really? Well, to get a handle on it, we've got to start with the guy who literally gave it a name, none other than Sigmund Freud. So Freud, he called this feeling das Unheimliche. And the key thing to get here is that it's not just about something being bizarre or scary. No, the uncanny is when something that should feel totally safe and familiar suddenly feels, well, deeply alien. It's like a glitch in our sense of what's home. And what's really cool is that the German word itself holds this fascinating paradox. See, Heimlich means homely, familiar, right? But it can also mean concealed or secret. So unheimlich, the uncanny, is what happens when something that was secretly hidden suddenly pops out into the open. The familiar becomes horrifying precisely because a repressed truth has just been revealed. So, if we were looking for one figure, a character who just perfectly personifies this whole psychological state, well, we don't have to look any further than ancient Greece. Let me introduce you to the original uninvited guest, the god Hermes. I mean, think about it for a second. Hermes is the god of thresholds, of doorways. He's supposed to guard the home from the outside, but he himself belongs to that wild world beyond the door. He's the messenger between our world and the underworld, so he's constantly blurring the lines. He basically represents that porous, shaky boundary between our conscious self, what Freud called the ego, and our primal instinctual drives, the id. He's the living embodiment of that terrifying idea that the walls we build around our minds, yeah, they're not nearly as secure as we like to think. Okay, so if Hermes is all about the cracks in our reality, that begs the question, right? Who's building the walls in the first place? To answer that, we need to bring in a really powerful counter-idea. And this is where the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche comes in, with his ideal of the sovereign architect. Now, this is that part of us, that part that strives to build a stable, meaningful, authentic self, purely through its own willpower. It is, for all intents and purposes, the ultimate project of the conscious ego. And this architect? They don't rely on old rules. They look out at a world that has no built-in meaning. And instead of despairing, they say, fine, I'll build my own. They use what Nietzsche famously called the will to power. And we're not talking about dominating other people here, but about achieving complete self-mastery. It really is the ultimate vision of the mind as an impenetrable fortress, built by sheer force of will. So, this brings us to the big conflict, the main event. What happens when the architect's perfectly ordered, self-made world gets a little visit from our uncanny messenger, Hermes? I mean, what happens when the parts of ourselves that we've carefully bricked over start knocking from the other side? Well, the first way the uncanny breaks through is with this concept of the double. You know, that deeply disturbing reflection of ourselves that just isn't quite right. And Hermes just illustrates this brilliantly. Remember, he's the divine thief. He steals Apollo's cattle by making them walk backward, completely messing with logic. He is the shadow of our civilized selves, that little part of us that just wants to break the rules. He's our double. And he proves that no matter what we try to lock away inside, it can always, always find a way out, stealing our very sense of being at home in our own skin. But the uncanny isn't just about some shadow self. The second form it takes is, well, it's way more fundamental. It's the return of our deep, repressed awareness of our own mortality. You see, Hermes is also the psychopomp, the one who guides souls to the underworld. And that is the ultimate uncanny journey. Think about it. Death is our final home, yet we spend our entire lives trying to forget about it. Hermes just walks that line, collapsing that comfortable distinction we make between the living and the dead. He's there to remind our carefully constructed ego of the one single truth it can never ever build its way out of. He embodies what Freud called the repetition compulsion, that unconscious drive we have to repeat foundational experiences, pulling us back to some earlier primordial state.
And finally, the uncanny can show up in a way that we've all experienced, probably every day, when language itself, the very tool of our rational mind, betrays us.
Remember, Hermes is the god of messengers, but he's also the god of liars. And this is a perfect stand-in for the Freudian slip. That moment you say something you totally didn't mean to say, and a repressed thought just slips out. All of a sudden, your own voice sounds alien to you. That's Hermes, showing us that our rational thoughts are basically haunted by deeper meanings we just can't always control.
Okay, I know this has all been a little abstract, so let's bring it all home, and I mean that quite literally with a case study that I'm willing to bet you've all experienced.
So picture this. The scene is simple. You're safe at home, it's your fortress. And then, suddenly, a floorboard creaks upstairs. Logically, you know it's probably just the house settling, right? But why does that logic do absolutely nothing to stop that feeling of dread? Wow, we can actually break that feeling down using the framework we've just built. Is the fear about a double, an intruder in the house with you? Or is it the house itself, this inanimate object, suddenly acting like it's alive? Or maybe it's like a linguistic slip, but for your senses, where you just can't trust your own interpretation of reality anymore. Because ultimately, that late-night creak isn't just a sound. It's Hermes knocking at your door. It's the uncanny reminder that the fortress you so carefully built, the conscious mind of the sovereign architect, is actually haunted from within by all the things you've tried so hard to push away. So we'll leave you with this final thought. In a way, we are all sovereign architects, busy building the walls of our lives. But the real question is, what are those walls actually keeping out? And maybe more importantly, what are they trapping inside? What truths is your inner Hermes just waiting for the right moment to deliver?